On today's episode, I'll look at Blackhawks team and individual stats through their opening 21 games.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Per usual, please be sure to go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well. I'm not going to be having Mailbag Monday here this week as we got a lot to get into on today's show, but we'll be bringing it back this time next week. So make sure to drop your Blackhawks related questions down in the comment section below. You can also DM me on any one of my social media accounts, and make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Even if you're someone who frequently listens through an audio platform, please make sure to jump on over to YouTube to hit that subscribe button for me. 100% free, won't cost you anything, and really does help me out tremendously. Last but certainly not least, got to let you all know as well that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, be sure to check out FanDuel.com right now to have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone's start to their week has gotten, everyone's week has gotten off to a wonderful start. There we go. Opening things up on today's episode as we're back in action here on Locked On Blackhawks. It's time for deep dive number 2 on the Chicago Blackhawks, which, as I mentioned during deep dive number 1, but just to reiterate here again today, I'll be doing this following every 10 to 11 games throughout the completion of the 2024-25 regular season, breaking the Blackhawks campaign into 8 individual parts. Unfortunately, part 1 wasn't very fun to break down the Blackhawks, and neither will be part 2 here today, as the Hawks now sit 7-12-2 through their opening 21 games. Good for dead last in the NHL standings once again, following their dreadful 3-2 overtime loss to the Philadelphia Flyers in their last time out on Saturday, which, because I got so much to get to on today's show here today, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it. Also, it was just a super frustrating way to spend a Saturday afternoon when there's so much other great sports going on. College football is absolute madness right now. I sit down, start my weekend with the Chicago Blackhawks, and then they go and have a typical Chicago Blackhawks type of effort. So frustrating in a game script that we've just seen repeatedly through the opening 21 contest. The Blackhawks have shown us they can get off to good starts. They can remain competitive. Did it here again on Saturday in Philadelphia, led 1-0 after the opening 20. That's now the 4th time in their last 6 games they've had the lead after the first period, and actually in each of their last 6 games, they've either had the lead or been tied at the end of the first period. So the Blackhawks continue to get off to good starts. They fought and held that 2-0 advantage going into the third period, but then an absolute blunder, per usual, down the stretch whenever the Blackhawks do have a lead in the final frame. Philadelphia surges, manages to tie the game 2-2, and then Matvei Michkov, because, of course, with the overtime winner. Super, super frustrating game that kind of just coagulated all of the frustrations and emotions and feelings about the Chicago Blackhawks early on this year into one game. Connor Bedard continues to be stymied. He didn't wind up with a shot on goal for a second consecutive game. First time that's happened to him at the NHL level so far in his career. Also is still without a goal now for 12 consecutive games. Was playing with Jason Dickinson and Joey Anderson once again, which I don't think to anyone's surprise, that trio didn't really muster up a whole lot. Someone who did muster up a whole lot was Lucas Reichel, responsible a big part in both of the Blackhawks goals that they had in Philadelphia. Doesn't earn him more ice time in the final frame. The Blackhawks go in that shell mode there in the final 20 to try to hold on. It ends up not working. Lucas Reichel continues to not get more ice time despite being one of the most efficient and effective Blackhawks forwards. And Luke Richardson just continues to use the same tactics that don't seem to be working continuously. So it's tough times here for the Chicago Blackhawks. By the way, they now have only generated one power play opportunity in each of their last 5 games. That's the first time that's happened to not only the Blackhawks, but any NHL team since 2019. It is absolutely abysmal and frustrating to be a Blackhawks fan right here, right now. But jumping into the team statistics to kind of tell us what the numbers suggest, we know watching the Blackhawks has been very frustrating, but was very curious to see what kind of some of the team statistics look like for this Blackhawks squad through their opening 21, as well as some individual player statistics to get a deeper look at how they're kind of faring out there on the ice. Starting off with the team statistics here for the Blackhawks, in terms of goals for per game, that's where they're struggling the most right now. And actually, I'm pretty surprised to see that they're not dead last in the NHL in that category. They're 31st, averaging just 2.33 goals per game. That's the area that's really killing this Blackhawks squad because defensively, they're in the top half of the league. They're averaging just 3.00 goals against per game, which is good for 13th in the NHL. On the penalty kill as well, they've been pretty solid in the top half of the NHL. In that category as well, 14th in the NHL at 79%. The power play even has been pretty decent for the Blackhawks, 12th in the NHL, converting on 21% of their opportunities. The problem is they just can't get to the man advantage because they can't get any sustained time in the offensive zone. They can't really generate any high danger scoring chances. And this has been a real glaring issue for this Blackhawks team basically every night now through their opening 21. What's also frustrating, though, about this lack of offense is how good they are defensively and how capable they are of playing close with any given opponent. I mean, it's not like the Blackhawks, despite being last in the standings, are getting blown out or anything or look like the worst team in the NHL. No, they're just scoring like the worst team in the NHL. And despite that, they still only have a minus 13 goal differential this year, which is 24th in the league. So Luke Richardson, I know we throw a lot of flack towards him for the lack of offense that he's able to have his team create, but defensively, he does deserve his props because he makes this Blackhawks team have a chance on a nightly basis. They just don't have enough offensive firepower, which is, I think, a little bit more frustrating considering how good they are defensively and how good their goaltending has been so far this year. Jay Fresh Hockey, who is someone I regularly shout out here on the podcast, someone I recommend everyone who has a Twitter account, an X account, whatever it's called now these days, definitely someone I recommend following and honestly even subscribing to Jay Fresh's hockey cards. I think his Patreon's like $5 a month, something I pay for, but you get a little bit of a deeper dive in his hockey cards on individual players, and he shares some pretty good team analytics throughout the course of the season as well. One that really stood out to me that he posted over the weekend, the Blackhawks in terms of team goaltending, I think it's goals saved above expected as a team. The Blackhawks are 8th in that category with plus 6.3 goals this year. Peter Mrazek, Arvid Soderblom have been outstanding in the defense. Again, another statistic that shows how good the Blackhawks defense has been this year. In terms of 5-on-5 expected goals against per 60 minutes, the Blackhawks are 16th in that category, allowing just 2.40 expected goals per game. So defensively, they're really solid. But on the offensive side of things, the lack of creativity, the lack of generating scoring chances is so glaring. In terms of 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60 minutes, the Blackhawks are 30th in the NHL, generating just 2.12 goals, ahead of only Detroit and St. Louis, both of which have been going through their offensive problems here so far this year. And 5-on-5 expected goals percentage, the Blackhawks are 24th, garnering just 46.8% of that share, which isn't dead last in the NHL because it's the goals for percentage, the total percentage of the goals for that are expected for the game, which defensively the Blackhawks are good. So even though their offense doesn't muster up very much, the difference isn't that large because their defense has been good, if that makes sense if you're picking up what I'm putting down on. But basically, what's going on this year is become pretty clear of the coaching style of Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson. As I mentioned, defensively, he's a solid defensive coach. As someone who played over 1,500 games as a defensive defenseman in this league, He knows how to play good defense, and the Blackhawks goaltenders are responding well with that defensive system also. But offensively, Luke Richardson doesn't seem like he has many adjustments to make on the offensive side of things. It doesn't feel like he has many solutions to problems that the Blackhawks are facing, because we've seen it in the line combinations this year. I mean, he's legitimately just throwing things at the wall, hoping that they would work, which I don't think is a great sign of an NHL head coach. And some interesting numbers that I found via at Shy Prospects on X, another account that I highly recommend following. Since Luke Richardson took over in 2022-2023, yes, I know the Blackhawks haven't given him a lot to work with in terms of roster talent, but I think these numbers are pretty damning. The Blackhawks are last in that stretch in shots for per 60 minutes, last in expected goals per 60 minutes, last in scoring chances per 60 minutes, high danger chances per 60 minutes, and goals per 60 minutes at even strength. So this is just kind of who Luke Richardson is as a head coach, I feel like. He's just not someone that can really squeeze out a whole lot of productivity on the offensive side of things, but is capable of being a good defensive coach. And this just kind of puts the Blackhawks in a really tough spot, because they wanted to be more competitive this year, and they certainly are accomplishing that, but it's at the cost of this team doing nothing offensively. Connor Bedard's confidence is, not looking great right now based on the comments that he's made. We've heard multiple other Blackhawks be outspoken in terms of a lack of confidence going down right now in this locker room. So we're kind of at this point where rock is meeting a hard place, and I don't think the Blackhawks are going to fire Coach Luke Richardson here in the midway point of the season, as I've kind of reiterated a couple of times on the show, because to me, that's a move you make when you're a team in contention. The Blackhawks never had legitimate aspirations of being a Stanley Cup playoff contender this year. So even though Luke Richardson is underwhelming, I still don't think the Blackhawks are in a spot where they're going to fire their head coach at the midway point of the season, even though it is becoming apparently clear that Luke Richardson just doesn't have the answers offensively. He's just not, to be blunt, a very good offensive-minded coach. So that puts the Blackhawks in a real tough spot, because they can hang in there. They can play against the best. It's just the lack of goal scoring is really holding them back in terms of taking these solid performances against good teams and catapulting them into wins. It's hard to win in this league when, I think the Blackhawks have scored 3 goals twice here, maybe 3 times in the month of November. It has been a brutal stretch. So yeah, the numbers back up the offensive deficiencies that not only the Blackhawks are going through this year, but have been pretty clear throughout Luke Richardson's tenure here, which again is unfortunate, because I do think he's a capable defensive-minded head coach. And I think in a different situation, Luke Richardson can be a good coach. It's just for this rebuilding Blackhawks squad that needs to focus on Connor Bedard and his development over kind of the greater good of the team, aka winning games. I don't know if Luke Richardson is necessarily the right guy for that. So that's kind of what I'm taking in based on looking upon these team stats through the Blackhawks opening 21 games of the season. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think, your input on what these team statistics kind of tell us about this squad through their opening 21. Coming up in just a minute, though, Blackhawks fans, do not go anywhere, as I'll turn the tides a little bit and dive into some individual Blackhawks player statistics here, as we're now at the quarter mark of the 24-25 regular season. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and will have the chance to win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app now gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And it's been tough sledding for our Chicago Bears ever since that heartbreaker Hail Mary to the Washington Commanders. it feels kind of nonsensical for me to come on here and recommend to go and bet the Chicago Bears over at FanDuel. It probably seems smarter to fade the Chicago Bears from here on out. However you want to go about it, though, make your Sundays more fun by checking out FanDuel. And if you're not already a member, create an account and you'll have the chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes. That's FanDuel.com. Again, if you're not already a member, create an account and you'll have the chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Now, for your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become fantasy hockey experts and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the link to Locked On Fantasy Hockey down in the description or search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, turning over the leaf and diving into some Blackhawks individual player statistics after taking a gander at some team statistics here in segment 1. Starting things off, it's got to be none other than number 98, Connor Bedard, who of course is going through his roughest stretch since becoming an NHLer, as he now officially has not scored a goal in 12 consecutive games. It's been since October 26th in Dallas, the last time that Bedsy found the back of the net. So it's been about a month now. I talked about the frustrations in segment 1. He's talking about a lack of confidence, and this is the most frustrated he's been, and it seems like he can't do anything right. It's a tough time for Connor Bedard. However, what I will say is, diving into his individual statistics and the analytics, I know there are a lot of fingers being pointed at Connor Bedard, and you see Matvei Michkov score the overtime winner, and people are dying to see more productivity out of Connor Bedard. What I will say is, I'm still not worried about the kid, even though I've talked about the lacking confidence that's clearly out there right now. That's he's stated that in the media, and also this tough stretch of his and the lack of shots on goal, right? Back-to-back games without a shot on goal. I still think it ultimately comes down to Bedard is just in a really tough situation. I mean, the Blackhawks haven't been able to establish another line mate with him all season long. He's been playing with Jason Dickinson and Joey Anderson recently, which I don't think anyone expected that trio to ever work. I mentioned the opposing team having him circled on their whiteboard going into every game. And also, as what will be more apparent here in a second when I go through more Blackhawks individual player stats, but he's not getting help from literally anyone. This 19-year-old kid is still the leading scorer for the Blackhawks, despite his best weapon being completely absent right here, right now. A 19-year-old in his second NHL sophomore season is getting a whole lot more criticism than Taylor Hall is getting, Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Kurashev, all of which are extremely underwhelming their expectations right here, right now. The only reason that Connor Bedard is the one who's getting the finger pointed at him and getting a lot of flack is because he had that generational status labeled next to him, which I know when you have that status, people are going to expect you to put up Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid type of numbers. And unfortunately, Connor Bedard hasn't been able to carry that over. And I don't think, that he has necessarily the speed that those two players had when they immediately came into the league, but how he's being utilized, who he's playing with, and the lack of production from everyone around him certainly plays a factor into this as well. It is not Connor Bedard's fault. And also the underlying numbers that I'm about to go through here in a second still tell me that he's being an effective player. It's just a tough spot for him to be in right now for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned in segment 1, how Luke Richardson goes about things. Connor Bedard being a center iceman up until the last couple of games, a center iceman in Luke Richardson's system, you're going to be asked to do a lot on the defensive side of things as a former defensive defenseman, someone who has success with a defensive style. He expects you to be good defensively, and those are things you want to see Connor Bedard grow into, right? But it's at the cost of his offense right now, his bread and butter, and where the Blackhawks not only need him shining the most to help them win games right here, right now, but is the priority of this rebuild when, again, we don't have Stanley Cup aspirations. So there's a lot going into it for Connor Bedard, but getting into the numbers, even though he hasn't found the back of the net in just about a month now, he only has 2 points in his last 6 games. He's still the leading point scorer for the Blackhawks. He's still the leading assist man for the Blackhawks. His best weapon isn't working for him right now, which I think that has to flip any day now. He almost broke his goal drought in that game against the Flyers. Unfortunately, his shot banged off the post and somehow didn't bank in off of Kolosov. No idea how that puck didn't find the back of the net, but it's going to happen here soon for Connor Bedard. He's just got to stick with it and get more pucks on net if he can. I think that's also part in him being used in a better manner. But getting into the numbers, I know I've been rambling. 21 games for Connor Bedard, only 3 goals is super frustrating. That's tied for 7th on the team in goals. Does, though, have 12 assists, which is first on the team. Does have 15 points, which is first on the team. And again, this is still coming when not only is he not getting any goal scoring, but he's not really doing a whole lot on the Blackhawks power play. No power play goals for number 98 is absolutely concerning. The Blackhawks, as a team, aren't generating a lot of power play opportunities, so that absolutely goes hand in hand with that. This is probably the area where I've been a little bit, probably the most disappointed with Connor Bedard this year, is he hasn't been that dominant on the man advantage. The one-timer at the left dot, has been pretty much absent all year long, or even the big shot at the left dot. That's something that has probably been the most disappointing to me and that I'm kind of going to give him some flack for, but the rest, as I've mentioned, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Shooting 5.5%, which for Connor Bedard is just mind-melting. Do think he has to do a better job of getting some shots on goal, though. Only 55 shots in 21 games, and as I mentioned, no shots in back-to-back. 19 minutes, 25 seconds of time on ice, a little bit down from last year, but still getting the primary opportunities for this Blackhawks team. Another area that is concerning, though, for Bedard, 29.7 face-off win percentage, which is even worse than last year. And there are some growing concerns. I know he's still only 19, but you would have liked to see some progression out of him in that area. And we've seen the exact opposite. So I do wonder about how long this trial is going to be for Connor Bedard on the wing. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a permanent move, but it is definitely something to keep in mind that Connor Bedard and his struggles at the faceoff dot, which again are to be expected out of a young kid, but it is something that could make the Blackhawks think about giving him more opportunities on the wing. And then getting into the analytics, 44.4 Corsi for percentage at 5-on-5, right around the team average, been on the ice for 11 goals for to 10 against. So again, even though the goal scoring has completely eluded him, he's still on the right side of the goals for battle at 5-on-5. Defensively, I don't think he's been as much of a liability as he was last year. Still don't think it's like elite level defense like Jason Dickinson is providing, but I do think it's been a little bit better, and nice to see that Blackhawks goaltenders have a 93.8 on ice save percentage whenever Bedard is out there. Some pretty decent analytics here for Bedard. Yeah, I know he's frustrated. He's just going to have to bear with it. And hopefully Luke Richardson can give him some more quality line mates. And when that does happen, just continue to give them an opportunity to build some chemistry with one another. Joey Anderson and Jason Dickinson. Joey Anderson, for the most part, that was never going to work with Connor Bedard. Next up, we have Teuvo Teravainen, who does have 2 points in his last 3 games, but still only has 3 in his last 16 overall. Been very underwhelming after signing a 3-year deal for pretty good money to return to the Blackhawks here this summer. And also only has 2 goals since October 12th against the Edmonton Oilers, in which he had 2 goals that night. So since that 2-goal performance against Edmonton, Teuvo Teravainen only has 2 goals ever since. In total on the year, he's played in 21 games, and honestly, I think he could be due for a healthy scratching here soon. Only has 5 goals, 5 assists for 10 points, which sadly is tied for 3rd on this Blackhawks team, which I think tells you how much of an offensive struggle it's been for them. Teravainen is minus 11 in the plus-minus, which I don't think is a noteworthy stat to be looking at in terms of deciding whether a player's been good or bad, but there are a couple players in particular who have some ridiculous plus-minuses on the bad side for the Blackhawks, and Teuvo is one of them. Also only has 1 even-strength goal through his opening 21 games, only 3 even-strength points. Absolutely not good enough. does have a decent shooting percentage, 12.2%, but only has 31 shots on goal so far for the year. 17 minutes and 17 minutes and 17 seconds of time on ice is what he's averaging. It's the first time that he's above 17 minutes in 3 years. So getting a good opportunity, but not doing a whole lot with it. The analytics are okay for Teuvo, 45.4 Corsi for percentage, but has only been on the ice for 7 goals for at even strength through 21 games compared to just 12 against. Defensively, he's been okay for the opportunities, but offense has gone completely dry, and that just can't happen considering what he was paid to be brought back and the opportunity that he's really been getting inside the top 6 on a nightly basis. Another guy who was brought in by the Blackhawks this summer that's been super underwhelming is Tyler Bertuzzi, who now only has 1 assist in his last 6 games. Felt like he was turning the corner there a couple of weeks ago, but now has kind of reverted back to not a whole lot of anything out there on the ice from him. Has played in each of the Blackhawks' opening 21 games, but like Teravainen, would not be surprised to see Tyler Bertuzzi getting a healthy scratching here because of his lack of consistency. Only has 5 goals, but even worse, 2 assists for for Tyler Bertuzzi through his opening 21 games, which is fewer than what TJ Brodie has. Think about that. Tyler Bertuzzi, the biggest offseason signing that Kyle Davidson has ever had in his tenure, has 2 assists through his opening 21 games. Absolutely abysmal. Only 7 points on the year for Bertuzzi, is tied for 10th among all Blackhawks players. Also has a -9 plus-minus rating. And oh yeah, only has 3 even strength points in 21 games as well. Only 34 shots on goal, so not even getting a lot of opportunities. Averaging just 15 minutes and 18 seconds of time on ice as well. Clearly not trusted on by Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson. It's the lowest time on ice that I know it's only 21 games into the year, so obviously not a full season's worth. But if this were to continue, it would be the lowest time on ice that Tyler Bertuzzi has had in the NHL since his rookie year. The analytics are okay for Bertuzzi, which I know the eye test has not been very good. I still would like to give him an opportunity with Connor Bedard, but he's not helping himself out with his play out there on the ice. But a 46.1 Corsi for percentage, about team average, but on the ice, though, for only 8 goals for at even strength, which isn't good enough for what he's being paid and what we know he's capable of. Only 10 goals against, though, and I believe he was at 8 or 9 the last time we did this during part 1. So defensively, why do I keep saying TJ Brodie? Tyler Bertuzzi has been really good, but we just need more offensive output. We need more, I think, in terms of the effort level, right? Like the eye test hasn't been very good for him. Teravainen and Bertuzzi off to a pretty disastrous starts to their season. Taylor Hall also off to a pretty disastrous start, and all 3 of these guys being underwhelming is a huge part in the Blackhawks' offensive struggles, and I also think in Connor Bedard's struggles as well. Taylor Hall doesn't have any points in his last 7 games and only has he has no goals in his last 13, which for a guy who said he was surprised with his healthy scratching, considering the lack of production or consistency, I wouldn't be that too surprised if I was Taylor Hall. Also only has 2 games over his last 7 with more than 1 shot on goal, so hasn't even been all that aggressive whenever the puck has been on his stick. And so far for the year in 20 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. Those 6 points are tied for 12th among all Blackhawks skaters. I know he's coming off of a torn ACL and is just kind of getting back into that consistent game rep type of mentality, but it still hasn't been good enough out of Taylor Hall. Also only has 1 power play point so far this year. 42 shots on goal is decent, but only converting at a 4.8% clip as of right now, which honestly tells me there's probably some positive regression coming there with Taylor Hall, but man, it's been frustrating for him. Does have some pretty good analytics though. 48.3 Corsi for percentage, only on the ice though for 7 goals, 4 to 9 against. 92.8 on ice save percentage. Defensively though, that's never what he's really known for. What these analytics tell me though, out of Taylor Hall, is he is someone who can get in the offensive zone and generate scoring chances for your team. And I think that's because of his skating ability, the way that he can lug the puck through the neutral zone. Like there is still some upside in Taylor Hall's game. I just wonder about the mixing and matching and using him in right situations. Like I think that's kind of an issue for this entire Blackhawks forward group, but I do think Taylor Hall has been better than Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi, despite him only having 6 points in these opening 20 games. I think his style works well in terms of what the Blackhawks need more out of. It's just about trying to use him in the right manner. But undoubtedly, one of the Blackhawks' best forwards here so far this year has been number 73, Lukas Reichel, who snapped a 7-game point drought with 2 points on Saturday in Philadelphia. Had 2-point performances each of the last 2 times he's actually traveled to Philly. And now on the year in 17 games, remember he was being healthy scratched, which is hilarious now in hindsight to begin the year. He's got 2 points, 6 assists, which are tied for 5th on the Blackhawks. 8 points is tied for 6th among all skaters. And he's been doing a lot of it at even strength. Only 1 power play point so far this year for Lukas Reichel. And that comes despite him playing with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith down on the 4th line, which, okay, look, maybe I will say that is a good spot for Lukas Reichel. For whatever reason, that trio has been effective. But you need to give them more opportunities. You need to give Lukas Reichel more of a chance because he is one of the few players on this Blackhawks team that can create through the neutral zone, that can turn defense into offense. And for him to be responsible, have his fingerprints all over both of the Blackhawks goals on Saturday, and to not get more of an opportunity down the stretch there, and for this to continuously happen, I just don't understand what Luke Richardson needs to see out of Lukas Reichel to give him more of an opportunity. His numbers are good here. 29 shots on goal. I still think there's room for him to grow in the shooting department, as he's only shooting 6.9% so far this year. But despite him having all of these good performances, some of them don't even result in points, but there are times where he looks like he's one of the few Blackhawks who look capable of generating a high scoring opportunity. Lukas Reichel is 11th among Blackhawks forwards in time on ice this year. I just don't get it. Don't get it whatsoever. I know the analytics aren't great in terms of Corsi 4, but I think that's because he is a 4th liner, and that's just a symptom of who he's playing with out there, and they're going to get some defensive situations. And even in defensive situations, Lukas Reichel has been good there this year. He's been on the ice for 7 goals for to only 5 against in 17 games worth of action. So he's being a more responsible type of defensive forward, even though he's having to play the center ice position, which I don't think he's a center iceman. Just the Blackhawks' lack of depth at that position. He's only won 33% of his faceoffs this year. But even though he's answering that bell that Luke Richardson wanted to see more of that style out of him, it's still, while he's also putting up numbers, right? He's been one of the more effective 5-on-5 skaters for the Blackhawks. Still not getting him more ice time. I don't understand. It's one of my biggest gripes with Luke Richardson. Philip Kurashev, who I'll get to here in just a second, he has 2 points in his last 9 games, 1 assist and 4 points in 18 games on the year. He continues to get top-line opportunities with Connor Bedard. Why? Why can't Lukas Reichel spend more time there than just half a game? I don't understand it. Philip Kurashev, like Taylor Hall, like Tyler Bertuzzi, like Teuvo Teravainen, is a huge reason why this Blackhawks offense is floundering right now. 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points in 18 games for Philip Kurashev. I didn't expect him to repeat the same numbers that he had last year, but I certainly thought he was more capable than this. Team worst -16 plus-minus rating. Isn't really even doing much on the power play. Only 1 power play point so far this year. He only has 21 shots on goal in 18 games, averaging 15 minutes and 55 seconds of time on ice. What I will give him credit for is he's been good when he's played center. He's won 50.3% of his faceoffs, which has been needed. But man, Philip Kurashev is not getting it done on the offensive side of things. 43.0 Corsi 4 percentage, one of the worst among Blackhawks forwards. Has been on the ice for 2 goals for at even strength so far this year to 12 against. 89.4 on-ice save percentage, which is the worst among all Blackhawks forwards. So not good defensively, not good offensively. Philip Kurashev has been a big nothing burger for the Blackhawks this year, and that's killing them. Ryan Donato, on the flip side, fortunately, has been one of the better Blackhawks forwards. It's not all negative here when talking through individual player statistics. Even though Donato has cooled off recently, only 1 point in his last 6 games, still is the leading goal scorer for the Blackhawks in 19 games of action, because remember, he was also getting healthy scratched earlier on in the year, which is ridiculous. 8 goals, 3 assists for 11 points in 19 games. Those 11 points are good for second on the team. 10 of those points have come at even strength. Ryan Donato has been awesome, shooting 16.7% with 48 shots on goal. I think that's a mentality that more of these struggling Blackhawks forwards need to keep in mind. Ryan Donato, not a lot of them are pretty shots, but he's getting the biscuit on net, and he's getting rewarded for it. Also has won 51.4% of his faceoffs, which I don't think he's a natural center iceman, but just given the Blackhawks' deficiencies down the middle and at the dot, he might just have to play more center moving forward. He's also chipped in for 36 hits, 45.7 Corsi for percentage, been on the ice to 7 goals for, to 7 against, 94.1 on ice save percentage. Offensively, defensively, Ryan Donato is getting it done right now and is the I think Peter Mrazek's the MVP, but offensively, Ryan Donato has been the sneaky MVP. Last forward I'll get into here, as I know segment 2 is dragging on, but we got a lot to get to on today's show, with this being part 2 of our deep dive on the Chicago Blackhawks. Dickinson played in all 21 games for the Blackhawks. Offensively, hasn't kind of carried over the certified goal scorer nickname that I dubbed for him last year. Only 4 goals, with 2 of them coming a couple of games ago, one playing with Bedard on the top line against the Ducks. Chipped in for 3 assists, 7 points total on the year. Is +2, though, for the Blackhawks, and just one of 3 players that have a positive plus-minus through the opening 21. All 7 of those points for Dickinson have come at even strength, which has been nice. Is still shooting 18.2% this year, but only has 22 shots on goal. So need to get our boy Dickinson, who I know is focused on the defensive side of things, need to have him get some more pucks on net, because he's still scoring at a certified goal scorer type of clip. Faceoffs have taken a little bit of a dip, though, for Dickinson this year. Finished at 50% last year, 46.3 so far this year, 34 hits. Also hasn't been as physical, but the analytics on the defensive side of things have remained marvelous. 43.6 Corsi for percentage. I know that's a little bit lower than some of the guys I mentioned, but he is used in more defensive type of situations and has impressively been on the ice for 8 goals for to just 5 goals against in 21 games. Think about that. Jason Dickinson is the man that Luke Richardson trusts to go and get the toughest matchups night in and night out. And he's still only been on the ice for 5 goals for in 21 games at even strength. That is unbelievable, with a 95.7 on ice save percentage, highest among all Blackhawks skaters. Jason Dickinson, I know you don't get a ton of attention because you're a defensive-minded center on a lowly Chicago Blackhawks team, but I appreciate what you do for us, buddy, and I hope you get some Selke nominations again this year, because you truly are one of the best defensive-minded centers in the entire league. And I do wonder if at some point in time the Blackhawks think about moving on from him, because they could possibly get a pretty decent return. There are a lot of teams who are on the fringe of contending for a Stanley Cup that would love to add a Jason Dickinson to their bottom 6 in penalty kill. Shout out to Jason Dickinson. He and Ryan Donato have been the 2 unsung heroes of this Blackhawks team in a forward group that has had a lot of lackluster play. Moving to the defensemen here real quick. Alex Vlasic, the first one they got to talk about. Seth Jones, out with injury right now, so not going to get to him. Alec Martinez still doesn't have enough games, I think, to get like a good sample size, so not going to dive into him, but starting with Alex Vlasic, who has just been lovely on the back end for the Blackhawks this year. Still searching for his first goal, but does have 8 assists in the opening 21 games this year. That's tied for second among all Blackhawks skaters in assists. Those 8 points are also tied for 6th among Blackhawks skaters. And what I like to see out of Alex Vlasic is he has 4 points at even strength and 4 points on the power play. And I never really envisioned that Alex Vlasic would even have power play 2 type of upside, but he's flashed that so far this year, and he's obviously playing on the top power play unit with Seth Jones out right now, and I think that's worked wonders in terms of his puck game development, his confidence with the puck on his stick. And not only do I think is that going to be beneficial for him in the offensive zone and his offensive abilities long term, but I think that's going to give him more confidence with the puck on his stick in the defensive zone, and the trust in him to get the puck out of harm's way. And we've seen a lot of that out of Alex Vlasic this year. Already the Blackhawks' most trusted defensive defenseman, and we're seeing a growing offensive game alongside it. It has been marvelous. Only 24 shots on goal, though, for Vlasic in 21 games. For a guy who plays a lot, 23 minutes and 30 seconds of time on ice. Only going to go up with Seth Jones out right now as he gets leaned on as the number 1 defenseman, which, again, for his age, is absolutely marvelous. Would like to see him, though, get more pucks on net and also try to get more power on that slap shot, man. He had one that was up over 100 miles an hour about a week ago. Got to see more of those big bombs out of Alex Vlasic on the back end, especially with Seth Jones out, and the rest of this defense really doesn't provide a lot offensively. Vlasic has also chipped in for 55 blocks Analytically, 42.1 Corsi for percentage, very similar to Jason Dickinson, a little bit lower because of the situations he gets used in, but has been on the ice for 17 goals for to only 16 against at even strength for someone who plays almost half the game for a tough Blackhawks team that's at the bottom of the standings. That is very noteworthy for him to be on the right side of that battle. Also, 91.5 on-ice save percentage for Blackhawks goaltenders. Whenever Alex Vlasic is out there, just continues to be the number one defenseman in the defensive zone for the Chicago Blackhawks. Wyatt Kaiser, who hasn't really got a lot of talk about him this year because he only has 1 point in his opening 19 games, hasn't done a ton offensively, hasn't really gotten a lot of like press time or I don't think there are a lot of Blackhawks fans talking about him, but I'll tell you what, with a defensive defenseman, and I think that's what Wyatt Kaiser is kind of transitioning into a little bit more of. I had some hopes for his offensive game. Doesn't seem to be there, at least as of now. But sometimes when you're a defenseman, less is more. When you're not being talked about, that means you're doing a pretty good job. And analytically, I think Wyatt Kaiser has done a really good job and shown a lot of maturation from what we saw early on last year where he struggled. In 19 games, he does only have 1 assist and 1 point, but he has a 0 plus-minus rating for the Blackhawks, which I think is noteworthy, again, for a bad Blackhawks team, again, still being a youngster. Only 10 penalty minutes. That was a huge issue for Wyatt Kaiser last year. I think he had 22 in 17 games before being reassigned to Rockford. Would like to see him get the puck on net a little bit more. Only 18 shots on goal, averaging 17 minutes and 3 seconds of time on ice. So second pairing type of guy for the Blackhawks this year. Chipped in with 38 block shots, 29 hits as well, which I think is noteworthy for a guy who doesn't have the biggest size. And how about these analytics? 48.9 Corsi for percentage out of Alex Vlasic. That's one of the best among all Blackhawks skaters. Also has only been on the ice for, only 6 goals for, but also 6 against at even strength in 19 games of action. That's pretty noteworthy for a young defenseman in his first full NHL campaign, and a 95.0 on-ice save percentage. How about that? Yeah, there are still some blunders for Wyatt Kaiser, more so in terms of defensive zone coverage, and I think he needs to get a little bit tougher in front of his goaltender, but those are all things that I think we can expect for him as he continues to get older and add some more experience. So I've been pretty happy with what I've seen out of Wyatt Kaiser so far this year, despite not much offensive production coming from him. TJ Brodie, next defenseman, played in 18 of the Blackhawks' 21 games, no goals, 3 assists, 3 points, 3 assists, more than what Tyler Bertuzzi has produced so far this year. But of course, TJ Brodie has been very, very lackluster in the defensive zone, -6. Only 6 penalty minutes, though, which has at least been good. He hasn't been spending a lot of time in the box. Only 8 shots on goal, though. Doesn't really provide you with much of anything offensively. And what I think is noteworthy with Brodie here is he's only averaging 15 minutes and 28 seconds of time on ice for the Blackhawks, which has fallen off a cliff for him because, as I've mentioned on the show a couple of times, TJ Brodie hasn't averaged fewer than 20 minutes since his first year in the NHL way back in 2011-2012. So his play is kind of dove off a cliff here so far for the Blackhawks. He's a liability defensively. He doesn't really create all that much offensively. I will give him some credit here. I think he's found his footing a lot better in these last couple of weeks, but for a guy who signed a 2-year deal at his price tag, yeah, it's been a sketchy start to TJ Brodie's career. Analytically, though, not terrible. 46.8 Corsi for percentage is actually better than what I imagined, but he's only been on the ice for 4 goals for at even strength. Again, doesn't really give you anything offensively. To 11 goals against, more than, almost double what Wyatt Kaiser has been on the ice for as a 10-plus year veteran at the NHL. Not good enough out of TJ Brodie, and quite honestly, man, these free agents that Kyle Davidson have brought in have not been good whatsoever for the Blackhawks this year. Next, we have Connor Murphy, who's been one of the unsung heroes for the Blackhawks. A nice bounce back in his game so far. 21 games played in all of them for the Blackhawks. Doesn't have any goals, but does have 8 assists, which, as I mentioned, those 8 apples tied for second among all Blackhawk skaters. 8 points tied for 6th. And is also as many points as he had in 46 games last year. And also has a +4. A team high +4 plus-minus rating. Really love to see that out of Connor Murphy. Does need to stay out of the box a little bit, though. 21 penalty minutes, leads all Blackhawks defensemen. Only 18 shots on goal, but that's not really his forte. Love to see him up over the 20-minute plateau, though, for the first time in a couple of years. I think has gathered some more trust from head coach Luke Richardson with his consistency through the opening 21 games. Also chipped in for 46 blocks, 30 hits, has a 42.0 Corsi for percentage, but very similar to Dickinson, very similar to Vlasic. Used a lot in the defensive zone and has been on the ice for 15 goals for. So nice offensive productivity out of Connor Murphy to only 11 goals against. And he and Alex Vlasic have been really solid with one another, and that pairing's going to be leaned on heavily with Seth Jones out of the lineup. And I love to see that Murphy, the Blackhawks goaltenders, have a 94.0 on-ice save percentage whenever Connor Murphy is on the ice. Last but certainly not least, I know this is a long episode, but I really wanted to dive into all of these individual player statistics for the Blackhawks. We have Nolan Allen, last but certainly not least, played in 17 of the opening 21 games for the Blackhawks. No goals out of him as well, but he does have 4 assists for 4 points. -4 plus-minus rating with 10 penalty minutes. Only 8 shots on goal while averaging 13 minutes and 44 seconds of time on ice. So a third-line role strictly for Nolan Allen so far this year. Chipped in for 12 blocks and 15 hits. Analytically, though, I think this is where you see a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of he and Wyatt Kaiser. Allen has a 40.3 Corsi for percentage, which is the lowest among all Blackhawks skaters and all Blackhawks defensemen. Has been on the ice for 7 goals for, so I think he is a little bit more capably offensively than I anticipated. That's never going to be a strength of his game, but has been more capable, I think, in the offensive zone than what we've seen out of TJ Brody and what we've seen out of Wyatt Kaiser, but defensively, he's still struggled in his own end. 12 goals against, only a 90.5 on-ice save percentage, which is a lot lower than the other defensemen that I just ran through. It's been a little bit of a struggle for Nolan Allen, but again, that's kind of to be expected in his first NHL action. We saw that out of Wyatt Kaiser last year, and even in Alex Vlasic's first NHL stint, where once he finished up his junior year at BU, he got some action in. There were some up and down games for him in there as well. So I'm not concerned or discouraged whatsoever about Nolan Allen's kind of inconsistencies. It's just kind of a result of him being at a new level for the first time and in over his head a little bit as a 21-year-old kid. Not concerned whatsoever, but I think it is clear that Wyatt Kaiser has been the better of the two in terms of the young defenseman and has made some leaps and bounds compared to when we saw him early on with the Blackhawks this time last year. So there are the deep dives, a beefy dive into all the Blackhawks individual player statistics through their opening 21 games. As a whole, what do I take from those player statistics? Again, it's that this offense, while I think Luke Richardson isn't a good offensive head coach and isn't using guys in the right situations, it's still on these players to go out there and produce. And the key members of this forward group, outside of Connor Bedard, aren't really doing their part right now. Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev. Outside of Connor Bedard, those were the real forwards that you had expectations for going into this year. And not only would I say all 4 of those guys are underwhelming, they're all off to disastrous starts, in my opinion. And that's why the Blackhawks' offensive output has been disastrous, and they're one of the worst offensive teams in the entire NHL so far this year. All right, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Again, thank you to everyone who tuned into the show. Be sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at Jack Bushman too, but be sure to go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.